Okay, so this first book we're going to read is In Defiance of the Chryxt. It's one of my own novels that I read. It's a novella. It's broken up into chapters, each chapter being about 2 to 3 pages long. I'm going to go ahead and read the first couple chapters tonight, and then we'll pick up tomorrow where we left off. Chapter 1. Justice sat at an inn drinking a weak blend of herbal tea, thinking about a sign posted by the door. The nearby town of Mageholm was under attack. Swarms of invading orcs had come over the northern mountain pass and were attempting to take the town by storm. Any other town in all of Meadow Valley would have been in a much different situation than the one that Mageholm found itself in. Being inhabited almost entirely by powerful mages, the town's defenses were virtually insurmountable. On the other hand, being as they were a town of powerful mages, most of the other nearby towns were hesitant to come to their aid. Many of these nearby towns were heavily defended themselves and would feel more comfortable with a nearby town populated by raiding orcs than a city of powerful mages. All but a small few had taken kind of a wait-and-see attitude towards the raids of the town of Mageholm. The flyer that Justice contemplated addressed this very problem. The town of Mageholm was offering a bounty on orc ears. 2 gold for each or comparable trade. The last part of the message was obviously aimed towards the local pagan horde, which really didn't do anything for the sake of money. But the problem remained. It was difficult for Justice to find the justice in this situation. As a ranger, what should his actions be? It seemed wrong somehow to Justice to accept payment for murder. On the other hand, it seemed his duty as a ranger to protect the people of Mageholm from the marauding orcs. Justice was still contemplating this when a drunk pagan loudly plopped himself in the seat next to Justice. Justice tensed immediately. He hadn't yet had much experience with pagans. His father had warned him they were an unpredictable race. They could be of the utmost help, or they could mean serious trouble. The pagan smiled at Justice, drunkenly revealing 2 rows of perfectly sharpened fangs. "What you got there, elf?" he asked, leaning forward to point at Justice's sword, meanwhile spilling several drops of hard cider onto the lapel of Justice's coat. "This is the sword of justice," Justice replied. "I'm going to use it to slay orcs." "No kiddin'," the pagan grinned. "Me too. I'm going to kill me some orcs. Those mages got lots of pretty beads. Their wine's wicked." Inwardly, Justice grinned. He should have known the pagan would be headed to Mageholm. He just hoped he hadn't found himself a new traveling companion. The pagan smiled, holding out his hand. "My name's Coda, and I guess this is your lucky day, because you just found yourself a new traveling companion." After saying this, Coda promptly stepped to the left twice and passed out on top of Justice's table. Justice intentionally awoke very early the next morning. He wanted to leave before Coda could meet up with him. Justice was on a quest for justice. The last thing he needed was some crazy pagan tagging along, throwing chaos into everything. That Coda was awfully drunk last night, Justice thought to himself as he crossed the courtyard to the stables. There is no way he'll be up this early. The smell of horse sweat and hay greeted Justice as he entered the stables, unconcerned about any unwanted companions. No sign of Coda, he thought, as he bridled his horse Silver Trails. Justice almost regretted the lack of company as he stroked the soft silver-gray mane of his gelding mare. Feeling alone but confident, he rode out of the stable gates and began his trek towards the other end of town and the road to Mageholm. Soon, after leaving the outskirts of town, Justice began to feel watched. The trees crowded onto the road, and the seldom used path felt an unseen predatory presence seemed to be watching Justice from the trees. Such is the way of the wild woods of Meadow Valley. The ancient woods that lay over most of Meadow Valley have been there long before the road on which Justice rode. The power they exerted over the twists and turns of the road made it quite apparent that they'd be there long after. Despite the natural setting of the road, the ranger Justice just could not relax. Nothing out of place. There was nothing to denote anyone's presence, but it just could not shake the feeling of eyes following him through the trees. Not dark or evil eyes, simply a wild animal that gazed at him through the green needled leaves. Around noon, Justice rested his horse. He was tired, and his feet ached from lack of walking. By now, the feeling of being watched had become almost familiar. Finding a clearing, he pulled his horse to a stop. Justice pulled his legs from his horse and leapt down to the ground. As his feet hit the earth, he turned towards the clearing. Sitting there, grinning at him, was Coda. "You make pretty good time for a guy on a horse." To his credit, Justice had more presence of mind than to jump or reach for his sword. "Where in Haida did you come from?" Justice asked, struggling to hide the surprise in his voice. "Nobody knows where my people come from for sure," Coda replied. "But we're children of the wild." "That's not what I mean. I thought I had left you in Wheat's Field." "I've been with you since you left." "Haven't you ever traveled with a pagan before?" "Look, would you feel better if I kept next to the trail so you can see me?" "I am an elven ranger. I know the woods of Meadow Valley better than any man. How did you sneak past me?" "That's your problem. I am not a man. I am a beast. Besides, I wasn't sneaking. I was scouting ahead." "Well, whatever you are, I don't need a companion. I can kill orcs by myself." Coda frowned. "I'm sorry to hear that. I thought you rangers were supposed to protect wild animals." Justice finally sat down, resting himself on a fallen log. "We don't have an obligation to protect wolves from the sheep. I get the feeling trying to protect you from orcs would be even more pointless." Coda leapt to his feet, laughing. "Are you about ready to go? If we hurry, we can reach the danger zone by nightfall." "Why would we want to reach the danger zone by nightfall?" Justice asked, wondering what exactly the pagan meant by the danger zone. Coda's friendly grin turned into a maliciously feral smile. "That's where the food is, and I'm hungry." Not wishing to hear any more about this strange creature's eating habits, Justice abruptly stood back up to his feet and headed towards his horse. "I'll ride with you till within a 3 hours ride of the orc encampments, but that is where I will stop for the night, and it is where we will be parting company." Coda disappeared into the tree line. We'll see. Chapter 2. The orc encampments were visible for several miles away. The night sky was alight with fire and magical explosions centered to the northern side of the city of Mageholm. The orc encampments were visible as a dotted line of bonfires gathered about the northern hills. Justice began to wonder if he had swallowed the dragon's tail by choosing this as his first quest, when he heard a voice call out to him from the darkness. "This will be a good place for you to camp for the night." This time, Justice did reach for his sword, his hands coming to rest on both sides of the single eye centered between the twin hilts. Justice saw a single pair of yellow eyes glowing in the night air. It still took him a moment to connect the voice with a face. Coda seemed not to notice Justice's apprehension as he approached. "We are about 3 hours out of town. The danger zone is one of my favorite inns. I'm going into town. If you want to camp out here where there could be an orc patrol wandering by at any time, be my guest. Personally, I'm for the safety of town. I like to catch orcs when they're sleeping, not the other way around." Snickering, Coda disappeared into the woods. Justice wasn't afraid of orcs in general. This may have been Justice's first quest, but it would be far from the first time he had swung his sword in a fight. But if that strange pagan Coda said there were orc patrols about, it would probably be wisest to try and get within the city gates. Justice kicked the sides of his horse and rode into a faster gallop. He wanted to reach the city gates before nightfall. And one of the orc patrols showed up. Justice came to the southern edge of Mageholm, expecting to see a fortress wall. He found an unprotected, almost empty street. 3 wizened old men sat on stools at the edge of the road. Justice rode up to the old man, a look of confusion apparent on his face. Justice felt the feather tingle of magic surround him moments before his horse, and he himself lifted up off the ground. It was then that he was at an appropriate angle to see the thick piles of black ash that made a perfect circle around this side of the city. "Who goes there?" crackled an old, rusty voice. "Justice Everbane," Justice stuttered out, trying to keep his cool. "I am a ranger here to help you with your orc infestation." The three wizards turned to each other. "Well, he looks like a ranger," said an old man wearing the pointed blue hat of a Hybridian alchemist. "Maybe he is the one that pagan mentioned," said another. Justice hung in midair, wondering what Coda may have mentioned about him to them. Just then the third mage spoke up. "Oh, just quit playing with the lad and let him in. We need all the help we can get." Unceremoniously, Justice was dumped back onto his horse, which promptly landed on the ground, dislodging Justice from his seat. Justice got up from the ground, grasping Silvertrail's reins. Exasperated, he asked, "Which way to the danger zone?" At this, all three mages burst up in uproarious laughter. Calming down, the mages gave him his directions. Justice had no trouble finding the danger zone. What he had trouble doing was convincing himself to go in. The danger zone was obviously a pagan hangout. Raucous music screamed from its walls. The outer walls of the inn did not look so much as if they had been painted, as much as if someone had splattered them with random bells of paint. And the timber of the building seemed somehow lopsided, as if the entire building might fall over or collapse at any moment. Justice stilled himself as he walked towards the doors, wondering if he wouldn't prefer the company of orcs to the rowdy crowd he was about to endure. As Justice approached the door, Coda came rolling out, locked into some kind of apparent struggle with a 3-foot dwarf. Justice stood in amazement as Coda and the unnamed dwarf wrestled in the streets laughing. Suddenly, Coda stood, pulling the dwarf up by his shoulders. Pointing to Justice, he said, "This is the kid I've been telling you about. Look at that blade he carries," pointing away from Justice and up over his shoulders to the double-bladed sword he wore on his back. "Just imagine what he could do with a blade like that. Why, if this kid can swing that thing at all, he'll keep us both in hell for the rest of our lives." "Aye," said the dwarf, rubbing his hands greedily, "and a fine profit as well." Justice was immediately angry. "You think I'm just some sword to bring you money? I will work on my own." "Oh, come on, kid," Coda said, walking towards Justice. "You're a ranger. You won't be much good to the regular city army in a fight like this. They've already got enough scouts. You know it, too, or you wouldn't have come here. You're better off joining a party. Between the three of us, we can keep a good eye on each other's backs." Justice tried to argue, but he knew he couldn't complete his first quest alone. These two cohorts seemed to have some experience. He probably should stick with them, at least until he learned what was going on. Justice awoke early the next morning in his room at the danger zone, well rested and ready for a fight. He rolled out of bed, opened the door, and headed down the rickety wooden stairs. He was greeted by a much quieter inn this early in the morning. Only a few tables were in use, mostly held by young pagan warriors, nursing hangovers from the night before. At a table near the cold, unlit brick fireplace sat Coda and the still as of yet unintroduced dwarf. "Sit down, lad," the dwarf called, motioning towards Justice. As Justice approached the scratched, rough-hewn tables, he could already smell the pungent aroma which wafted from the pipe Coda rested between his feral lips. "So how well do you swing that thing, boy?" the dwarf asked, aiming his glance at Justice's unique sword. "Well enough," Justice countered. "Well, you'll be needing to swing her pretty well to be keeping the orcs off in your head. Now let's get down to the plan." "He's a boy," Justice said. "My sword's a boy."